And we are back with Brunch, a taste of Tobago. And of course, I told you guys how interesting today is going to be. We have so many beautiful and wonderful people joining us today. And of course, my next guest is no different. Miss Onika Henry joins us. She's like a sister from another mister, as I love to call her. And we have had so many discussions with Onika over, the past couple months of the brunch family, the brunch episodes. And speaking on human sexuality is still a bit taboo in certain sectors. And so a level of understanding and education is what we really need to embrace. And so I welcome Onika to Brunch today. And of course, sex education classes for adults. Now, that caption alone, I'm going to grab at whatever information you're going to give me today. Once again, welcome.
Thank you.
And let's just delve in. Tell us what's going on.
All right. So, content warning for folks. I am going to try as much as possible to be appropriate for on air in case you have children nearby.
Right.
So that's a content warning. I decided to have these online classes for adults because based on my experience for the past few years, people have been asking. People want to know, well, how could I learn more? How can I be a part of what you do? And so in trying to find ways that are financially accessible for folks, I decided I can do group work, which means each person, it doesn't have to pay as much as if it was individual on one-on-one attention.
Right.
And I decided to call these classes Quickies because the intention is that they will be semi-formal, so short and sweet, sex ed classes for adults where the intention is to share medically accurate, developmentally appropriate, relevant, up-to-date information about sexuality and sexual health.
Right.
It is basically sex ed most of us never had growing up, and the sex ed that we deserved. That is what I'm trying to do. And I want to make it, fun.
Right. And fun.
Yes.
That's the key word here.
That is a keyword. Fun, well, it's one of the keywords.
Right.
I always say it is going to be a safe enough, brave enough, non-judgmental and fun space for you to participate in.
Right.
And all those are key. It needs to be safe enough and brave enough so people can share what their challenges are and perhaps even share what works and what doesn't work for them so others in the group can learn.
Definitely.
It needs also to be non-judgmental, which is part of creating that safe enough space for people to share things that they may feel fear, shame, or guilt about. And those are the three things that some of us call those three the unholy trinity. They tend to show up together when it comes to sexuality and sexual health.
Hand.
Yes. So creating a community online that feels safe enough and brave enough,
right?
That's non-judgmental and fun. Those are the keywords. It's critical for me to be able to create that online so people will participate fully and in an authentic way.
Definitely. And what about the persons who want to get involved? How do they get in touch with you? Let me just throw that out there before we delve. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm going to give my number and I'll repeat it. So 381-3049. 381-3049. So you can WhatsApp me.
Right.
You can also find me on Facebook at O. Henry Consultancy Services. I do have a Facebook page. So you can also message me there. And if you prefer email, it's ohenrybusiness@gmail.com.
Right. So you've covered all of the possible
ways of finding me.
That we can find you. So tell us, when are we carded to have these sessions starting?
Right. So the first session happens this Friday, and then there's another session next week Friday as well. And so there's not going to be like a set date and time every month. The group will decide, okay, this is the best date for us to meet again, and that's a semi-formal part of it. But this Friday is going to be the first class, and it will be an introduction to sex ed. So basically, I'll be sharing what sexuality education is about. And I'm really excited about that because I know some of the adults who would participate have children. And it is going to be preparing them to be a better parent for their child in terms of being the first sexuality educator for their children.
Yes.
Really, parents are the first sex educators for their children.
And it's important. It's so important what that narrative is going to be.
Yes.
Because it determines so much. We have so many persons. Just the other day we were talking about things that happen in your childhood and how much it affects you as an adult. And so many times we had not enough conversation. There was sometimes none at all. Lack of understanding one another, and all these things came into play. And there were just certain conversations that parents did not want to have with their children. I'm hoping that this changing, I'm seeing some change, positive change, but I'm hoping that this really helps moving forward.
Most definitely. I have had the experience and the privilege of teaching parents and then teaching their children. And this was a few years ago when I was doing some community work. And the beautiful experiences that came out of that is that I would meet both parents and child sometimes on the streets, just walking through Scarborough or traveling. And they'd both come up to me, miss, and and they'd share, what it has been like for them now to be able to talk about those things. And so it's one way of giving parents that empowerment and that comfort and the skills and the knowledge to make sure that their children do not make the same mistakes that they have. As well as part of what they're going to be learning is how do you spot those signs of bullying and of behaviors that may lead to intimate partner violence or domestic violence. You want to nip those in the bud. So it's a great way to start teaching your children how to treat each other so that they do not grow up to become victims or survivors of abuse or abusers. That is all part of sex education too.
And most of the times we leave out too many factors that are so vital and so important. And you brought some wonderful stuff with you today. So, let's just get into what you have.
I have to share. Okay.
And let's just share a bit. It's a sharing kind of day.
Okay. Nice.
So let's share.
So let me first start with one of the models that I use to teach about sexuality. So this is, I don't know where to show that if it can be seen. So on this, you are seeing the different aspects of sexuality that we teach about. And so there is the spiritual aspect of sex, that sense of how we are connected or disconnected from ourselves or from our partner. The mental aspect, about judgment, discernment, knowledge, attitudes, beliefs. Then there is body, which is why most people end up in my space, because there is something physical that's not working. So some kind of dysfunction, we tend to refer to those two. So sensations, being able to experience pleasure or not. And of course, the heart or the emotional aspect of sex. So that fear, shame, and guilt, or the ability to be intimate. The ability to feel safe enough to share and to connect with another partner. So we teach about this. So this is one of the models I'll be teaching about and how these show up in our lives and how they impact each other.
And they're connected.
Yes.
So when we miss out on, like I said before, certain parts of the conversation, then we're not getting the full experience in terms of educating ourselves.
Yes.
And this is what we have to move away from. We have to move away from all of the negativities and the stereotypes. Let's face it, colonialism has not been good to us, and that has impacted us really, really greatly.
Correct. Something else I'll share. So once again, content warning, folks. So this is a vulva puppet. So this represents the outside of the female genitals. And so often I would use this as a teaching tool to talk about the parts, as well as with clients to help them identify where are they experiencing pain or numbness, where there might be scar tissue, etc. So that's sometimes that's easier for us to figure out, okay, how do we direct the treatment? How do we direct touch? How do we decide what kind of medication or treatment or lubricant, etc. is needed. And so this is, for me, a really wonderful tool, and it works online really well. So one of the tools I use virtually to teach about anatomy. And the one that's next to you.
Okay, I need to hand this over.
Yes, thank you. All right. So this one is also this is the female pelvic model as well.
Right.
And this one shows the reproductive system. So this is another tool that I use to teach about where the parts and where the organs are located. I also use this when talking and teaching about using internal condom or a female condom for STI protection and prevention. And so these are just a couple of the tools that I would use to teach, not just in person, but online.
Right.
Yeah.
So just to recap, because I know certain persons are just joining us.
Yeah.
Tell us when these classes are going to be starting, because I know that even when you came on before, there was a bunch of buzz, a bunch of questions.
That's nice.
And everybody just seemed so intrigued. So just remind us again when the classes will be starting. Persons can really look forward to that open sort of dialogue, and I think that is what is missing.
Yes. So this Friday will be the first class, and it starts at 7:30, if I remember correctly. 7:30 p.m. It'll last for between 60 to 75 minutes, and even the length of the class at that point in time, I get to decide it with the participants. All right. So it's not hard and fast. There will be home play. Notice I said home play and not homework.
Right.
There will be home play, so there'll be exercise and activities that they would be invited to participate in outside of the class time. Which they don't have to do, it's optional.
Right.
But there will also be a group that I would form, WhatsApp group, or maybe another app, in which we can follow up on class discussions, in which they can talk about the home play, etc.
Right. Yeah. And that dialogue is so important. It's really something that I feel that so many of us miss. Sex education has been such a taboo subject, and
badly done, if I do say so myself.
Yeah. And so for me, the conversations did not come as they should have. And there was a generic sort of blueprint when it came to sex education in schools. And sometimes there was no sex education at all. And this really impacted generations.
Yes.
What we think, how we view ourselves.
Our rate of teenage pregnancies.
Yeah.
The rate and increase of STIs. How we've managed or not managed our HIV infection rates and management of HIV.
Yeah.
It impacts all of that, which also impacts the economics of our space. Because these healthcare issues cost money to treat. They interfere with people's ability to show up for work and show up as parents, as people in their fullest capacity. And so there's so many links that I can share between what lack of sex education means in terms of the rest of our lives. And so many links that I can share or talk about in terms of what the skills in sexuality education, how those skills can be transferred into other aspects of life, like negotiating. Because learning to negotiate consent is a key part, and you can transfer those skills into your workplace, into how you talk to your children, particularly your teenagers.
Yes. And one of the things that you spoke on that gender-based violence that sometimes erupts. Now, I knew of certain persons that would have the lines are blurred as to what is accepted and what is not. I've heard certain persons say that, okay, well, you are supposed to give me what I want. I am your husband, or I am your wife. And the conversation takes that type of pathway. And so many persons do not know this is actually a thing.
Yes, that it's a skill that you can learn.
Yes.
Sexuality, sex is not a talent that we're born with. Abstinence is not a talent that we're born with.
Right.
It is a skill that we can learn. And those skills may need to change as our bodies change as we get older. as our values change, we also need to change how we respond to people. Yeah, because
Yeah.
values would influence our behavior and our choices. And values clarification and values education is part of sexuality education, which is something you could also transfer into your daily life.
Definitely. Do you think that parents are ashamed when it comes to speaking to their children about sex?
So there's that same unholy trinity that I refer to, the fear, shame, and guilt.
Yes. So
shows up.
let's touch on that.
Yeah. And so if you were not taught to be comfortable with your sexuality, with who you are as a sexual being, if you were not given the vocabulary and the language to talk about what you're experiencing and what you need to know, if you weren't given the developmentally appropriate knowledge and skills as you got older, you don't have that to pass on to your children.
Oh,
you need to go looking for that.
Yeah.
So part of the legacy, if you want to call it that we have left in our society around sex and sexuality is that inability to understand our bodies, to understand how do we negotiate for what we want with a partner, and how do we manage challenges and conflicts when they arise, because those are skills that need to be taught. We're not just going to figure them out on our own. Most of us are not going to. And so what you want to do is reduce the trial and error around something that is so sensitive, that is so important, that it can have such a big impact on how we experience our wellness and our well-being. You know.
But what is the narrative like, though? I know that I may sound like a broken record, but there's always a narrative, whether it's changing or not, whether it's stagnant or not. What is it like in this time and space that we're in?
So I think we are experiencing some level of transformation. The unfortunate thing is that it's coming because there are just so many negative outcomes because we have not done it for so long. And so if we begin to look at our STI rates among teenagers, our teenage pregnancy rates, if we begin to look at the levels of intimate partner violence and domestic violence, I think people are beginning to realize, oh my gosh, we need to do something.
Yes.
Something needs to change. And part of what needs to change is how we are addressing sexuality and sexual education in our space.
Definitely.
And so the change is coming because we're beginning to feel the really huge and uncomfortable and worrying negative impacts of not doing it for all these years.
Definitely. And you know, Onika, there's so much that we need to talk about. And I keep stressing on the fact that you have to come back. There's always something to talk about.
There's always something to talk about, for sure.
Yeah, and we just want to thank you for being a part of Brunch today. And of course, from our family to yours, blessings, success in whatever you endeavor to do. So we want to thank you for being a part of Brunch. We want to thank you for the information, because
most welcome.
You know, education is the key. All right, so thank you once again for being a part of Brunch today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we will definitely have to have you back because we have some more to talk about. Right?
Nice.
So
looking forward.
So it's a date.
It's a date. Looking forward to it.
So we're going to take a break, guys. We're going to be right back with more Brunch, a taste of Tobago. But before I go, you know I have to mention this trivia question once again. There is a boardwalk that meanders through a dense mangrove. Where is this located? The answer at the end of the show. When we return, Karine Akilisha Jerome, manager of Kaj Designs, joins us on the Brunch set. We're going to take a break and we're going to be right back with more Brunch, a taste of Tobago.